Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. It's really exciting to have you all here. While we're waiting for everybody to join, we'd love it if in the chat you could just say who you are and where you're joining from. And if you like, tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to learn tonight or achieve tonight. And we'll start in just a couple seconds. All right, so let's get started. My name is Caroline Levine. I'm a member of the TIAA Divest Core Committee. And I was part of the team also that persuaded Cornell University to divest its endowment, its $7 billion endowment from fossil fuels. So as I mentioned a minute ago, we'd really love to hear from you in the chat. And just so you know, we'll be here for half an hour at the end from 8 to 8:30 for live discussion. If there's anything that you want to talk to us about in terms of what you're interested in achieving, if you've got ideas for us, or if you have questions. And if you have questions, if you could put them in the Q&A, which should be down at the bottom of your screen, that would be helpful. We can gather them all together there. So we're super excited to have people from so many different places here tonight, including Alabama, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Hawaii, Illinois, Kansas, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, Nebraska, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia, Wisconsin, and Australia. We're so excited to welcome you. So let me start by reviewing our agenda for tonight, and then you'll see what the rest of the webinar will look like, but we really want to talk about how we're going to take our action to the next level. So I'm going to do a little bit of introduction, and then we're going to hear from Bill McKibben. And after that, Bill Kish, who's one of our core team, is going to talk about successes to date and what we've learned from our engagements with TIAA so far. After that, we'll hear from Tristan Quintinito, who from ActionAid, who's going to talk to us about land grabs and the connection between climate destruction, TIAA's land holdings, and why we are thinking about fossil fuel divestment together with land grabs. Molly Arnauti, another member of our core team, is going to give us a sense of the action plan going forward. Then we're going to hear from Ilana Cohen, who's been part of the Harvard divestment success that we recently learned about. And then I'll close our discussion, just a couple of quick slides. But then, as I mentioned, please feel welcome to stay on for half an hour and chat with us so that we can hear from you about what you're up to and what you care about. So first, I just want to remind us of the large context. I think we're all aware that the speed of climate chaos continues to exceed projections. To think about that, we can just register some of the headlines from just the last 6 months. The New York Times said 5 years ago, 1 in 10 people were affected by an extreme weather event every year. Now it's 1 in 3 people every year. CNN says a year's worth of rainfall fell in China in 3 days. We read in National Geographic that the 120-degree Fahrenheit temperatures brought on by the heat wave in the Pacific Northwest in June was more in line with what researchers had imagined would occur late in the century. Not to mention, of course, economic dislocation, mass migration, disruption of the food supply, and all of the human suffering this brings, especially to people of color and people in the global south. Now, TIAA matters a lot in this context, and that's why we are targeting them. They manage more than $1 trillion in assets, and that includes retirement funds for more than 15,000 institutions, and they have investments in more than 50 countries around the world. We calculate that they have more than $8 billion invested in fossil fuels and other companies that fuel climate destruction. So Enbridge, infamous for building Line 3, Halliburton, which has been very much into fracking, the Adani Group, which has built this or planned to build this terrible coal mine, Formosa Plastics, which is an environmental justice nightmare, and then the really big players in the oil industry, Exxon, Chevron, Shell, and more. TIAA says that they're a socially responsible company. And they keep telling us that that they're doing their best and that they can't possibly divest from fossil fuels because that would go against their fiduciary responsibility. But not only is this tremendously destructive, and who needs a retirement fund if the planet is on fire, but also it's just less and less persuasive every minute. So the fossil fuel industry is in permanent decline now, it's dying. And the idea that it's their fiduciary responsibility to be invested in fossil fuels seems to go against everything we know about economic indicators. It's also true that a lot of other pension funds have divested. Britain, can you move the slide, please? Oh, sorry. I'm missing this slide. I'm out of order with my slides. I apologize. Um, I did want to point out, and this is a slide that I've taken from fossilfreefunds.org, which is a great site that ranks and rates all of the different retirement funds. And so you can go and check on its competitors. But so my retirement is required to be, at least in part, in TIAA. And I look at this list of fossil fuel grades. You see that, those colored circles kind of in the middle of the screen. These are TIAA's funds. They're getting C's and D's, and that's compared to other funds, which are doing much better. So if there's this sense that TIAA is greenwashing all the time, they're telling us that they're socially responsible, but they're over and over again um, uh, investing in some of the worst companies. So over on the left of the screen, you can see the Equity Index Fund, which is a pretty common fund that a lot of nonprofits and universities have their employees in. And down below, you can see ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, Chevron. These are the kinds of investments that TIAA is making in our retirement. In my money, they're putting my money into Chevron, for example. So we are super energized about this fight. And there have been some really big wins recently, including big wins for environmental justice. TIAA is invested in Valero, which is the company that tried to ram an oil pipeline through a Black neighborhood in Memphis, Tennessee. And these leaders of that movement led a victory just this past summer. Justin Pearson, who's on the right, says, "We've shown them that we aren't the path of least resistance, we are the path of resilience." So there's been a lot of wins for fighting pipelines, but there's also been divestments of universities and retirement funds. And awesome examples like this one of work for climate justice that is also work for social and racial justice. We've talked to TIAA and they're scared. They're definitely feeling the pressure. Our colleague Bill Kish will talk about that in a moment. So we know we can win this. Britton, what's the next slide? So we've got Bill McKibben joining us. He couldn't be here in person, but he sent this message. He's a huge fan of TIAA Divest. And if you read his column in the New Yorker, you'll know that he gives us shout outs every so often. And he made this message specifically for us and for this evening.
This is Bill McKibben, and I'm extraordinarily happy to be joining here and lending my voice in support of this really important campaign around TIAA, of which, among other things, as a university professor, I am a part of. And so this is very, very close to my heart. I have no doubt that you're going to win this campaign because, among other things, everybody is divesting. Every important institution, or so many of them, which academics do their work. As of this afternoon, I'm recording this on Friday, the 8th of October. About 2 hours ago, Dartmouth University divested from fossil fuel, becoming the 5th of the 8 Ivies to divest. We've watched the most important Catholic institutions in the country, Georgetown, say, divest. We've watched the great public universities, the University of California system, the University of Michigan divest from fossil fuel. We've watched the most important, the oldest universities in the English-speaking world, Oxford and Cambridge, more than half the educational institutions in the UK. We've watched huge parts of the philanthropic sector. We've watched huge public pension funds, New York State, New York City. Last week, the pension fund for employees in the province of Quebec, which was the 12th largest pension fund in the world. We're well north of $15 trillion now in funds that have divested from fossil fuel. Why is this happening? Why are we at this tipping point? Well, a bunch of reasons. One, the climate crisis becomes more apparent with every passing day. And you know, with every flood, every fire, every new record, it becomes harder and harder for any people of good conscience to continue their participation in trying basically to make a buck off the end of the world. Also, it's become clear that you can't make a buck off the end of the world, even if you're so amoral as to try. The fossil fuel industry has been a dog of an investment over the last decade. And people who divested did so not only at no cost to their returns, but with real benefit. And so it is just incredibly, incredibly important that we get the big players like TIAA into this right now. This is a timed test, climate change. We've got something like 8 years to cut emissions in half. So we need these guys to move with more speed than they are used to moving. We need them to stop playing games and hiding behind the idea of fiduciary responsibility. Look, Harvard hid behind that for a decade before they finally came out and admitted that real fiduciary responsibility means taking account of the future. It doesn't do any good to save up all our money for us to retire on if the planet that we're planning to retire on isn't going to be fit for our retirement. The young people have powerfully mobilized. That's why there have been these great student campaigns. But older people, including faculty, are now following them with enormous passion and enormous power. And that is why it is absolutely clear that TIAA, which is deeply invested in all kinds of nonsense, coal mines, this new Line 3 pipeline, 100 different greenwashing schemes. That's why it's so important that it act now to cut its ties to the fossil fuel industry. It's at American universities that we learned about the climate crisis. That's where the most basic research got done, from Scripps to Columbia to on and on and on. And it is obscene and absurd that these institutions, that the faculty of these institutions continue to have their retirement funds plowed into the very industries that have made a mockery of science for the last 30 years. The time is now. Please join in this effort. Please make this the next of these dominoes to fall. Many, many thanks.
Oh, that was excellent. And as always, I'm happy to hear from Bill McKibben, and I'm Bill Kish. I'm one of the founding members of TIAA Divest. I want to tell you about our campaign. It's been around for 2 years almost at this point. Our campaign started in early 2020 when several of us engaged in a direct action at a frack gas power plant in New York State that was financed by TIAA. We stopped construction at that plant for a day, but we got arrested for our trouble. So as we discussed how to follow, I just lost my place. As we discussed how to follow up on our protest against the plant and the 6 million tons of CO2 and other toxic pollutants that it spews each year, we decided to focus on the money that built the plant. And that's how TIAA Divest was born. So here's a brief summary timeline of what we've accomplished during our existence. Initially, in the summer of 2020, we attempted to engage with TIAA. Our interactions with Megan Fielding, their Director of Responsible Investing, is fully documented on our website. And this conversation was ultimately unrewarding and demonstrated that TIAA was not interested in listening. But we learned a lot, and it got us even more activated and somewhat enraged. We've engaged with our base, that's all of you, with webinars like this one and with our almost monthly newsletter. And during the spring semester, we helped faculty and staff at educational institutions and unions to pass resolutions demanding that TIAA clean up its act. Most recently, we addressed TIAA's greenwashing campaign head-on in collaboration with 113 other organizations. Resolutions demanding that TIAA divest its fossil fuel investments are a powerful way for TIAA's participants to make their voices heard. We facilitated passage of 12 faculty and union resolutions, all in New York so far. Each resolution was slightly different, but they all demand that TIAA stop investing in fossil fuels and other forms of climate destruction. We intend to develop a national reach over the coming months, and we're really hoping that some of you on this call today will help us get there. If you think you'd like to lead the way towards passing a divestment resolution at your institution, please let us know in the chat. We have a great divestment toolkit on our website, and we can connect you with faculty who've driven resolutions at New York schools who can help guide you through any rough spots. The SUNY and other divestment resolutions generated significant attention from the media. TIAA is super sensitive of their carefully cultivated public image. And every time we publish an article that demonstrates that TIAA is not aligning their business practices with their participants' ethics, you can be sure it causes a fire drill at TIAA's headquarters. Our media team can help you spread the word once you pass divestment resolutions or if you complete other pro-divestment actions. So we're anxious to work with you, as you can tell. The question that's probably on your minds right now is, how do we know that any of this stuff that TIAA Divest has done is actually being noticed at TIAA? And the answer is that TIAA is pumping out greenwash at record levels. They're desperately conducting damage control at the State University of New York system. 8 SUNY schools passed TIAA-specific divestment resolutions in the past year. And here's a way that TIAA is dealing with their PR problem. TIAA sent this email to its SUNY participants last month. There's hardly a single line of text here that represents reality. The central message that TIAA is an innovator in responsible investing is completely false. In fact, they're stuck in a mid-20th century investment model, and innovation is the last thing on their minds. Here's another way we can tell that TIAA is paying attention. Last May, realizing that they needed to deal with an impending public relations disaster, TIAA did what comes naturally to them. They deflected. TIAA announced their commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, 2050 being 29 years from now. I could go on for an hour about why this is a meaningless distraction, but I know that we'll be discussing this unacceptable timeline and the associated false solutions in a few minutes, so you'll hear more about it. We made a point of responding to TIAA's sham plan. We organized a joint statement by 113 organizations across the world calling on TIAA to take real action to address the climate emergency and the land justice disasters that they precipitated. We listed 6 specific demands that we believe TIAA needs to take before they can call themselves responsible investors. And this is how we expect to win. TIAA will continue to try everything in their power to keep looking like a responsible corporation, and we'll call them out each time. We will wear them down. And once they realize that the best way to look like a good actor, really the only way to look like a good actor, is to become a good actor, they'll do what dozens of other pension programs across the world have done. They'll divest. You can read the full sign-on letter that we sent to TIAA's CEO, Thasunda Brown-Duckett, on our website. Here are 6 demands on this slide. They're all no-brainers for any company that truly practices responsible investing, but TIAA needs to get past the spin stage and take real action to reduce the tremendous damage that their profits first mindset has given us. In just a moment, I'll hand the screen over to Tristan, but first, can I take a moment of your time to ask you to add your name to those 113 organizations who demanded that TIAA takes meaningful action to stop their planetary destruction? We've set up a petition for individuals to sign supporting our 6 demands. It's basically a shortened version of the sign-on letter I mentioned earlier. We'll post a link, hopefully right now, in the chat to this petition, and it'd be wonderful if each one of you could be among the first signers. We've come a long way in 2 years, and we know that with patience and work, we can get TIAA to do the right thing. We're looking forward to working with you to make that a reality. Now I'll turn the screen over to Tristan with my thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Bill. And hi, everybody. My name is Tristan Quintinito, and I'm the National Campaigner at ActionAid USA, which is an international development and human rights organization based in Washington, D.C. And we are a founding member of the Stop Land Grabs campaign, which formed about 5 years ago and involves organizations from the US, Canada, Europe, and Brazil to get financial institutions, and particularly TIAA, but also endowments like Harvard's, as well as public pension funds like those in New Mexico, New York, Vermont, and others to stop the financialization of farmland, which is leading to a new form of land grabs in which immensely powerful foreign companies, primarily often, are able to take and control land in far off areas that local communities need and have used for generations for their basic livelihoods. And now we see these new corporate net zero pledges as creating new conditions to accelerate these land grabs even further for false solutions aimed at creating questionable carbon sinks so that big polluters can maintain business as usual. And we've joined with TIAA Divest on this effort. Now I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes. And then since I'm going to give you a lot of information right now, we're going to take 5 minutes for a Q&A after my presentation. And so it would be great if folks can just, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A at any time during my presentation. So farmland became a big financial asset right after the 2008 financial crisis, as agribusiness companies, hedge funds, and others rushed to acquire farmland in the global south to take advantage of skyrocketing commodity prices. But now what we're seeing is that companies are acquiring farmland as a financial asset in and of itself. They're trying to speculate on the very price of land. So yeah, this is perfect. This slide is perfect. So TIAA began to acquire farmland in 2011, and it is now the largest institutional investor in farmland in the world. It has over 2 million acres worth about $8 billion on 4 continents, and you can see this in the slide. It is also a large and growing owner of timberland with over 700,000 acres of tree plantations on 3 continents worth almost $2 billion. So next slide. So you can see from these slides that TIAA owns land in the US, in Brazil, in Eastern Europe, and in Australia. It owns the most land in Brazil, easily over 1 million acres, worth about over $1 billion. And for the most part, TIAA's farms produce commodity crops like corn, soybeans, sugarcane, et cetera, produce a lot of chemicals, machinery, and they use them, their products go into biofuels, animal feed, for factory farms, processed foods, this kind of stuff. And the majority of their timberland is in short growth tree plantations like pine and eucalyptus, which is then turned into paper or burned as bioenergy, which is quote unquote, or so-called carbon neutral fuel. So the vast majority of this land is in unsustainable industrial monocrop production. This issue, excuse me, sorry, my children are trying to come in. This issue of TIAA's land acquisitions and land deals was first brought to our attention at ActionAid when reports emerged in 2015 that they had bought land in Brazil from a notorious land grabber accused of many crimes. And since that time, TIAA properties have been linked to deforestation, forest fires, and unsustainable agribusiness production. So next slide. Yeah. So additionally, TIAA has used a complicated corporate structure to evade a Brazilian law limiting foreign ownership of land. And last year, it was reported that the Brazilian government found TIAA to be in violation of that law. And they proposed that titles to over 100,000 acres of land be canceled, which would be a loss of over $500 million for TIAA. So these are images from two reports, one from Chain Reaction Research on the left, showing that use satellite imagery to document instances of deforestation on TIAA-owned land and other foreign-owned land. And then the other on the right is a report from Bloomberg into the Brazilian government's research or investigation. Next slide. On top of this, the environmental destruction in these regions is terrible, particularly in the Brazilian Cerrado, which is a savanna region neighboring the Amazon. And it's an overlooked but critical, absolutely critical ecosystem that must be preserved to address the climate crisis. It has tremendous biodiversity, and it's the origin of many rivers in Brazil. And if you don't know, Brazil is in the midst of a historic drought. It's like a decade of drought. And experts now are pointing to industrial agribusiness and deforestation as the main culprit of that drought. And the big impact of this drought, super relevant to this group, is that Brazil can't use its hydropower anymore. The water levels are too low, which means that's a renewable source of energy for Brazil. Of course, it also causes massive issues to the people living in the water basins, but now they're having to burn coal and other fossil fuels to try and compensate. So these things get worse and worse. So this slide is a map of the Cerrado, and all of the red is fire, for intentionally set forest fires primarily, which were tracked through satellite imagery. And TIAA's farms are the white dots. I'm not sure if you can see it, but they've got little corn insignias on them. And so they're right in the places where all these fires are being set. And you can see, of course, there's a lot more fire than there are TIAA farms. And that doesn't absolve TIAA of any responsibility. In fact, I think it puts more responsibility on them, because you see the problem is so widespread, so systemic. There's not really any way you can avoid participating in it. We have engaged with them for about 5 years, and they have responded with social responsibility report after social responsibility report after sustainability report and due diligence processes, but there's no way to avoid it when the problem is this widespread and systemic. And them having a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar fund trying to buy this land is just exacerbating these local problems and encouraging these local actors to do these things. So I don't have a slide for this, but it's important for our group to understand also that TIAA owns about 400,000 acres of land in the US worth about $4 billion. In California, they own tens of thousands of acres of orchards and vineyards, and they employ migrant workers. In the upper Midwest, also tens of thousands of acres where they're allowing agribusiness to take further control over farming and corporate farming. And in the Mississippi Delta, they have about 100,000 acres. A lot of that land, well, we don't know how much because it's very hard to track, but the history of land theft of African-American farmers in that region is extreme and widespread, and it's impossible to avoid. So again, they're benefiting from these processes of displacement and land grabbing. Next slide. And so now, with the announcement of TIAA's pledge to achieve net zero emissions, we're extremely concerned that all these land grabs will get worse. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, when it issued its major report in 2018 on how to keep the planet to only 1.5 degrees warming, said that we need to take immediate aggressive action to dramatically reduce global carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, and to then maintain consistent reductions in emissions to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So that means by 2050, there could be some minimal carbon emissions, but they would have to be canceled out by carbon sinks, by processes that can absorb and sequester carbon, like what a forest does. And so this idea is actually very important because it reminds us that in addition to reducing emissions, we also need to protect the natural ecosystems that help to cool the planet and regulate the climate. However, corporations, as well as the governments of wealthy countries like ours, have fixated on the net zero by 2050 part and completely ignored the cut 45% emissions by 2030 part. And they have also ignored the protecting existing ecosystems, and instead are trying to sequester carbon through industrializing and financializing the natural world through such false solutions as, and you can see them in this funny graphic, nature-based solutions, carbon offsetting, carbon markets, which are the way companies and I guess individuals too buy offsets, and other strategies. You see Red Plus, which I'm not going to get into. It's a complicated market-based mechanism to try to protect forests. But it is important to remember that net zero is not zero. Next slide. And we need to get to zero. So here are the 4 graphs from the IPCC report showing 4 potential futures. In the top left, you will see that the more we cut emissions now, the gray area, then the less we need carbon sequestration later, the yellow area, which is almost minimal, non-existent in the top left. But if we delay cutting emissions now and rely instead on netting them, then there is way more carbon that we have to sequester. And that's the bottom right scenario. And the problem with that bottom right scenario is that these carbon sequestration schemes are completely untested at such a large scale and would require pretty much impossible amounts of land. And then you're not even talking about the human rights violations that would go into acquiring that land. So, new evidence is coming out to suggest that various nature-based solutions that like large-scale tree planting don't work, in large part because they don't take into account any community needs or any of the other factors. They just plant trees and the trees die, or people cut them down because they need them or something along those lines, many factors. And then there are plans to sequester carbon in farmland soil, but that is incredibly risky, as that carbon can be released whenever the land is plowed up. There's no guarantee it stays in the earth. And so if we allow corporations and governments to convince us to focus on net zero by 2050, we will be in this bottom right scenario, and the amount of land needed to offset our carbon emissions will be massive. Next slide. So divestment from fossil fuels was not mentioned as part of TIAA's most recent climate action pledge, even though divestment from fossil fuels is a critical and essential action that we need the financial sector to take. That's their contribution, is to get money out of these industries. But instead, TIAA mentions offsetting their emissions and sequestering carbon. And we know, based on different media interviews and their own reports, that they are looking to their farmland and timberland holdings as major sources for carbon sequestration. This would mean more land grabs. So if you look on this slide, the image on the left is from their climate plan for their real estate holdings, which are also massive and global in scale. And you will see that there's a big blue bar towards the right, and that is for offsetting. And they're going to get to net zero in their real estate by offsetting 1/3 of all their emissions, which is the biggest by far of all the different strategies they have, but they don't explain how they're going to do it. They're just going to magically offset. And then the other image is from their responsible timber report. They write that, the text is too small for anyone to read, I imagine, but they write, there are 123 million acres in Brazil alone of land ready to be reforested. And they list in that map 250 million acres across Central and South America that is ripe for reforestation. Now, should some of that land be reforested? Maybe, probably, yes, that might be good. But what TIAA has in mind is more tree plantations that they want to burn as biomass energy, which is a very concerning idea, because there's this idea that it's carbon neutral, which is very, very suspect. They also want to receive carbon credits for sequestering carbon for creating these reforested plantations. And if you read that report, they never mention the communities that might be living on the land. They act as if this 250 million acres of land is just empty, which is a very colonial idea going back a long time. Since indigenous, I don't know exactly, but I'm sure there's lots of indigenous people living in that land. It's impossible that there aren't. And so given TIAA's track record on these land issues, we are extremely concerned. And that's why we're working with TIAA Divest, and that's why we're with you here today. So thank you. And I am happy to I went over a little bit, but I'm happy to look at the Q&A and see if there are any questions. I see one comment that asks if it's possible to get GIS data of the farms. So this was what our campaign initially launched over, is it was impossible to get this information. If you were a TIAA client, and we are at ActionAid USA, it was impossible to find out where these farms were, or whether our money was even invested in the farms. They're hidden in the TIAA traditional annuity. And through our activism, they did create a map, but they deliberately restricted the zoom so we couldn't find out where those farms are. We now have a general idea, but you have to do on the ground research, and it's incredibly time consuming and difficult.
Tristan, there's another question that was in the Q&A box from Robert, who's asking, are there examples that you cite where TIAA's real estate fund puts its money? Are the examples Tristan cites where TIAA's real estate fund puts its money? Sorry, I asked that weird.
The real estate fund is a little bit different. They own a lot of commercial buildings, residential buildings. If you go on the Nuveen is their subsidiary, or is one of their subsidiaries. It's a very complex corporate structure. You can see all the different real estate holdings they have around the world. It's quite massive. This is their farmland, timber holdings are in a different structure, different fund. Are there any other questions? I'm having trouble. I'm looking in the chat, but I may miss one.
I don't see any other questions in the chat or the Q&A box, but if there's any questions that come up on Tristan's presentation, feel free to add it to the Q&A box or add it to the chat, and we'll definitely get to it later on if something pops up for you.
And you can also go to the campaign website, stoplandgrabs.org. I'll put that in the chat as well. There's a lot of resources there. And now, thank you. I will pass it on to Molly Ornati from TIAA Divest.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Brittany, next slide. So thanks very much to everybody for being here tonight. Thank you to Tristan for that wonderful presentation that really reveals a whole aspect of climate change that we are often not aware of. I'm here tonight to really talk about how we win this campaign. Next. So our primary goal is to divest from climate destruction, and we have 5 key approaches to this. First of all, we want to pass more Senate resolutions on campuses nationally. We are also going to continue the SUNY campaign, as SUNY is the largest client of TIAA, and we've already had success with passing 12 resolutions within the SUNY system. The second approach is to expand our alliances with organizations. So like Action Aid is a great ally of ours. We are part of a coalition of 175 organizations called Stop the Money Pipeline. And so there are campaigns for a divestment against BlackRock, against Chase, Liberty Mutual. Every single day, there is a new financial institution that is being targeted for divestment. We work with them, we learn from them, we mutually support each other, and every success supports the success of every other campaign. And this is like an incredibly dynamic movement that is going on. We also plan to expand to other TIAA-dominated professions. So in the healthcare professions, a lot of people have TIAA as their investment options, as well as nonprofits and cultural institutions. Number 3 is a new initiative. Number 4. So we are in the process of creating a TIAA Divest Board of Advisors. And this is going to be experts in the field of environmental science and the field of finance. And they are going to come together to do a real deep analysis of TIAA's investments, create a viable guide for the specifics of the divestment process, and then monitor TIAA's actions when they do divest. And number 5 is broaden and build our base of support, increase our visibility and the volume of our actions. And that is where you come in. Next slide. So the big question is, what can you do? How can you be involved? In this Zoom room that we're all in right now with 53 people, there is a tremendous amount of knowledge and ability, creativity, contacts, ideas. And we want to help you figure out the best way for you to be involved that works for you. And so in order to do that, we are inviting you to fill out a campaign form that will be in your inbox after this meeting. Next. So the sign-up form has a lot of different questions, and people have different levels of availability. It's a difficult time for many people. Some people are very overwhelmed and they can manage one email a month. But there's also people who are just waiting to find a way to be active about the climate crisis. And they may want to join one of our work groups to help with media or to help with the development of the advisory board or a whole variety of different things. And we appreciate whatever time, skills, effort you have to offer. And we really want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts about this campaign, suggestions of directions to take, and how we can support what you want to do with this campaign. So the sign up has a real open-ended area where we really want to hear your thoughts and have a better understanding of our supporters. Next. So going forward, one of the ways we are going to scale up our actions is through our newsletter, so that you will be learning, like you did tonight, much more detail about TIAA's investments and their impacts. For example, a lot of people in the chat have been saying, is TIAA invested in line 3, which is a big pipeline struggle that's been going on for 7 years and is really starting to gain attention. And yes, TIAA is invested in Enbridge, which is the financial institution behind line 3. And each of these newsletters is really going to share more information about what TIAA is doing. You're going to get campaign updates. We're going to talk about what's working, what's not working. We're going to talk about how to communicate about this campaign, and every time we'll have several actions that you can take. Next. So in terms of the actions that we invite you to participate in, we're going to rely a lot, of course, on email, on phone calls, on letters, but we also really want to invite you to join the numerous work groups that we have. And, you know, we want people to think creatively. Maybe your daughter is unemployed and does graphic design. Or maybe you have a friend who went to school with the CEO of TIAA. So we want to get our creative juices flowing and thinking about what connections we have, who do we know, and how we can both take these actions and also escalate our strategies. And so, for example, there's 146 TIAA offices across the country. So maybe one day, in a synchronized manner, we will go and meet them at opening time at these various offices and declare it a crime zone, right? So who knows? There's many, many creative things we can do. And this is where we're looking for your engagement. Next. So let's talk about outreach or engagement, because this is one of the most important things you can do to build a campaign. And most people don't like to do it, right? Let's be honest. People feel they don't want to impose on others. They don't want to push people to do things that they don't want to do. And that's generally why it often isn't done that much. You know, that's why a lot of times we end up talking to each other and, you know, being in our bubble. But we really have to push out and really engage the people we know in this campaign. But the good thing is, it's not like you know, sitting in your apartment in Brooklyn and calling some stranger in rural Georgia, asking them to think about the great qualities of John Ossoff. It's not that. You're talking about something that's of importance to you, that you really care about. You're talking about your retirement. You're reaching out to probably a lot of people you know who are your colleagues, who also are invested in TIAA. And you're talking about sharing with them the information about what TIAA is doing. Do they know that their investment money is being used to fuel the climate crisis? So it's a very different way of reaching out. And so we really want to encourage everyone to do that. Next. So we are asking everybody on this call to reach out to 3 people. And we're talking again, friends, colleagues, former colleagues, and become what we call a hub. And in our next newsletter, we are going to have a hub kit. So you can have emails, sample emails you can send, talking points, a variety of tools to help make this an easier process. But it really feels logical that we should in 3 months be able to triple the number of people on this call. And we want to support you in this process, but we really want to learn how quickly we can grow, because that's so central to our success. Next. So you may be asking, who is our target? Well, of course, it's who can make this decision. And in the big picture, it's the CEO, the Sunda Brown Duckett, the CEO of TIAA. It's Nuveen, which is TIAA's investment manager. It's TIAA trustees. And so those are sort of the headline targets, but as the campaign develops, we will be finding new pressure points and new targets to engage you in. Next. So just to close out on this section, I want to just remind everybody of some of the wonderful strategic advantages of this campaign. TIAA's clients are in the vast majority educators, so a population predisposed to knowledge, to facing the truth, to wanting to understand the climate crisis and to act on it. Most teachers have, in society, I think that teachers still do have a certain moral authority, and they are often a progressive population that is open to discussing these ideas and raising up this process. Most teachers have their entire retirement invested in TIAA. So unlike other populations that are maybe more diversified in terms of what they're invested in, most teachers have just had this one choice of TIAA and their entire retirement is there. And in this campaign, we have unique leverage. We're talking about our money. It's not like a lot of campaigns where you're telling people to You want to encourage them to do something with their money. This is our money, and we have that power, and we really want to encourage everybody to appreciate the leverage that we can have if we all come together to use our power, to not choose individual solutions of a socially conscious fund, but act in unison, build that power so we can really force TIAA to divest from fossil fuels and these other harmful corporations. Really important to remember, divestment has no financial cost. This can be done with no financial loss at all. And in fact, it's given the state of the fossil fuel industry that Caroline mentioned in the beginning, it's a responsible decision. Sadly, we have seen that we cannot rely on political solutions. It's really hard to see what is happening with the climate change initiative in the Biden agenda. And that's extremely disheartening, but we cannot rely on political solutions. And the climate crisis is so complex, and there's so many different ways that it can be addressed, that comparatively divestment is actually an easy solution. It's really the wise, easiest, fastest solution. And so I hope everyone will agree with me that this is really a no-brainer, and let's get to work and get it done. So now it's my pleasure to introduce a veteran of the successful fossil fuel Divest Harvard campaign, Ilana Cohen. So bring it on, Ilana.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me tonight. It's really an honor to be here in solidarity with such an incredibly inspiring campaign. So thank you for that. Before I get into, like what Fossil Divest Harvard is and how we had this big victory recently, I just want to let you know a little bit about myself. So I have been organizing around climate justice since I was in high school. I am from Brooklyn in New York City. And for me, one of my most enduring memories is that of Hurricane Sandy. It hit when I was about 12, and I was terrified. I had never really consciously experienced climate disaster before. I was like hiding canned food and water under my dining room table, like gathering my family together. I was trapped inside for about 8 days, but at the end of the storm, my family was pretty fine. My neighborhood, which is middle class, predominantly white, and like physically on higher ground in the city, was largely okay. And seeing the disparity between that and my ability to go to school the day after the storm versus students only subway rides away from me who couldn't go to school for weeks afterward because of the devastation, who were in, areas where they were predominantly communities of color and low income communities. Seeing that disparity really for me was an awakening moment, and a call to sort of like mobilize the privileges that I had available to me from a very young age to fight for the fight of our lifetimes, which is that of climate justice, because there is no greater compounder of structural inequality and injustice than climate change. And that's sort of how I got into divestment organizing at Harvard, looking to continue that kind of environmental justice work. Can go to the next slide. So I got to Harvard. The divestment campaign back in like fall of 2018 had technically existed since around 2012, but unfortunately sort of fizzled out. Like classic graduation of key student organizers and just disillusionment with the administration had led to a sort of toning down of a campaign that was really vibrant for a long time. So I was able to connect with some peers who were really passionate about climate justice and buzzed about this idea of divestment, of like institutional accountability for both this industry that represents, the obstacle to a just and sustainable future, but also institutional accountability very specifically for our university, for a community of which we were a part now as Harvard students. So we relaunched the campaign with just a handful of folks. And today, like 3 years later, oh my God, our size is just burgeoned. I don't even know if I could say how many more people we have, which is incredible. This picture is of our 2019 Harvard Yale action. We stormed the field at halftime during the annual football game. I guess that's me in the pink jacket. I was one of our police liaisons, and I love this image for so many reasons. But the one I really want to pick out is that I think it's super emblematic of the kinds of tactics that we've used in the past few years, which really helped us win divestment at Harvard, which are creative direct actions, things that fundamentally disrupted the status quo. When we were on the field, I mean, we certainly didn't expect hundreds of people to pour down and join us, but the fact that they did was truly a testament to the reality that we are at a moment of public consciousness where people are understanding that, you know, there is no way to just enjoy a football game without holding our institutions accountable for taking serious action on, again, the fight of our lifetimes. It is just deeply hypocritical to sort of say that, you know, we can have universities in particular claiming to care about young people's futures, claiming to care about the planet, claiming to care about our communities, and then simultaneously investing in the destruction of all of that. Another key aspect of this moment was the coalition building work that went into it. You know, we spent a lot of time investing in our relationships with faculty, with alumni, with our peers, with other divestment campaigns around the country and on campus from other causes focused on extractive and exploitative industries like land grabs or prisons. And that is really part of the reason we have the power we do today. Can keep going. A third tactic I want to pull out was our filing of a legal complaint earlier this year. Actually, you could probably go to the next slide. Those are just some images of past actions. And yeah, so we filed a complaint basically arguing that Harvard's fossil fuel investments are not just immoral, not just financially risky, but also fundamentally illegal under a state law that exists in 49 US states. So this is a strategy that is super replicable. I can put links with more information in the chat later. But yeah, when Harvard announced divestment, it actually quoted language essentially from our legal complaint. So the complaint, you know, itself was not just like a conventional legal strategy. It was really a way of galvanizing public pressure and putting a spotlight on Harvard, saying we are calling the relevant legal authorities on you, and we are making a very big deal of this if you're going to continue to be an intransigent actor. So I just want to end by talking a little bit about our vision going forward. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll be quick, but you know, our campaign and this movement, right, the divestment movement is so much bigger than divestment itself. What it does is it trains new generations of activists. It gets together these communities that are really focused on alternative fossil-free world building. And that's what we've achieved here at Fossil Fuel Divest Harvard. You know, going forward, we have these two very big goals that sort of build on the work we've done so far. First, reinvestment. So seeing massive pools of money like Harvard's $53 billion endowment actually be held accountable to the needs and interests of the community members it's meant to serve and the people directly impacted by its investments. And then also total divestment. You know, the fossil fuel industry ties don't end with sort of where the endowment money is put or where the pension fund money is put. Institutions like Harvard welcome the fossil fuel industry on campus to fund research, to fund programming, to recruit, and so on and so forth. And it's our job to sever all of those ties because each one of them represents a different way in which our institutions lend their social license to an industry that is fundamentally blocking the future that we need to achieve. So I'll end there, and if folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer them here, or I can put an email in the chat.
Thank you so much, Ilana. That was really exciting to hear about. I was so excited when the coverage of the Harvard-Yale game happened. I thought that was a brilliant strategy. Britton, could you move us forward?
Yes, actually, I am going to pass it to Iris, who has done a little bit better of a job at tracking questions than I have. So Iris, do you want to take it away or?
All right, great. It is 7:59 and we did tell everyone this webinar is from 7 to 8. So some people may need to jump off, but all of us panelists are going to stay for half an hour and we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to go back to the top and begin with the questions that people asked early on. One was from Barbara Brandon, and she said, has Ford Foundation really divested? And what do we learn from that? And I put out a quick answer, which is just yes, Ford Foundation has divested along with MacArthur Foundation. So those are two recent victories. We've had more than a dozen victories just in the past month with divestment announcements. So I think that we should be mentioning in all of our publicity and pressuring TIAA that, hey, you know, Ford is divested, and MacArthur Foundation has divested, and just keep on listing for them all the institutions that are ahead of them with actual responsibility. Did any other panelists want to add something quick to that? We have a lot of other questions and comments.
Iris, it's Bill. I'd like to just add a comment.
Sure.
And that is that it's super important for everyone to realize that, as Bill McKibben said, TIAA has said to us and to other groups that have met with them that they don't see divestment as being a meaningful approach to solving the climate crisis. And they've also said that they don't think that they can do it because of, quote, fiduciary responsibility. Well, you know, if you take a look at the list of organizations, of pension funds, of retirement companies like TIAA that have divested literally trillions of dollars, it proves that TIAA is wrong, that they can do this. They just choose not to.
Great point, Bill. And then a really important tactical question. Roz Kish Levine asked, what is a first step for someone on a campus? I'm paraphrasing some of these. So a great first step is to reach out and try to identify even 2 or 3 colleagues. A lot of the resolutions that have been passed on the 12 campuses and campus union organizations that have been passed so far have been done by just a few people. So if you have a few colleagues, you can get it done. You don't need to have 50 people that are ready to storm the administration building in order to begin the process of getting a resolution passed. So we have an academic playbook that is on the resources section of our website, which is just TIAA-divest.org. And when you go to that academic playbook, there's a toolkit, a resolution toolkit within that gives you literally like a step-by-step how to pass a resolution. So does anybody else want to add something about kind of taking that first step to get it going on a particular campus?
I think this is Caroline, everybody. I just want to say that it can be very specific to each campus how to do it, but I'd be very happy to talk through the steps with anybody who wants to, you know, have a phone or a Zoom call or just email about how to get it started, because each campus has a different kind of governance structure. But one thing I would just say really quickly is that passing a resolution putting pressure on TIAA to divest is a pretty easy lift compared to getting your university to divest its endowment. That is all it has to do. All the Senate has to do is to say, we don't like what TIAA is doing. And that makes TIAA squirm. And then the university president and trustees don't have to do anything. So just to say it's not actually super hard to get that to do its work, and we'll help you with press to make sure that that makes the kind of impact that it should.
Great. Another really key tactical question that's also campus-based, and we've heard this before, as a matter of fact, we heard it at Harvard previously, that someone said they're having a hard time getting students to focus on something other than divesting the endowment. And in a way, Caroline just addressed that. But part of the answer to that is to go with faculty, because we want to get lots and lots of students and youth mobilized around TIAA, but often in this case, because faculty have their pensions directly invested in TIAA, they are the ones that will push it forward. So faculty can understand that they can get a resolution passed. They don't have to wait until the whole endowment is divested. Other comments about that from panelists?
We do also have some students who work with us, who'd be happy to contact students and try to make the student-to-student connection.
Yeah, not to put Ilana on the spot, but we'd love you to take an ongoing role as a galvanizer with the TIAA Divest campaign. That would be great. Also, Brian, I don't know if Brian can be unmuted, but Brian Obak is a faculty leader at SUNY and galvanized a lot of the resolutions. And he says, most faculty are very open to this. Many are not aware of where their retirement funds are invested, and they support fossil fuel divestment once they learn about it. So it's getting the attention of a few faculty members to start that usually is the most powerful thing. There was also a question about whether there are people on this call who are alumni and how specifically alumni can, there were two different questions. One is, how can alumni increase their leverage? And the other question is, how can retired people increase their power? So what are some ideas for both of those groups?
Well, I'd just say, you know, that's exactly who we're hoping to reach out to, that all of our actions and information that we're going to be sharing is really to involve those people that are very interested in being active and really have an important role to play. So that's why the sign-up form that you will be getting in your email tonight is really important, because we want to know what you want to do and what your special skills and talents are, and how we can connect you to other alumni. And there's so many ways that we welcome your involvement, and that's where we'll go forward.
Yeah, I would just add, my name is Brian Obak. I'm a faculty member at SUNY State University of New York at New Paltz, and was involved in a lot of the resolutions that were passed across the SUNY system. And I would say that, you know, retirees are especially, you know, relevant here, because they actually have funds invested in TIAA. You are the constituency, you are the customer. So there is a lot of leverage to be utilized there, and certainly alumni are better positioned to bring pressure on the university administration itself, and that's another sort of point of leverage that we can use, the sort of naming and shaming of the university, who are obviously in a position to put pressure on TIAA to shift where their funds are actually invested.
Okay, I'm also putting in the chat, for anyone that has a question or has a tactical idea or just wants to get going and get more resources and connect with us after the webinar. The default email for our whole group for TIAA Divest is contact@tiaadivest.org. So I'll write that in. Because this is the whole point of this particular webinar, is really to get more connected with you. And I want to mention that there was someone mentioning a couple of times, Terry Gleason was mentioning that they're going to get active with Mitra Corporation. So I don't know if that person can be unmuted or made a panelist, so that they can tell us a little bit about that. That sounded very intriguing. Then another really important housekeeping follow-up item is that the form that Molly mentioned, that will interview you about your affiliations, your contacts, your goals with TIAA Divest, your skills, that's going to go out tomorrow. So you'll get that in an email tomorrow. We really hope you respond quickly to that, because that will really build our base. There were a couple of questions about the, you know, where investments are held in TIAA. And one thing I want to mention is that TIAA is making a really big deal about how super, super green their real estate holdings allegedly are. So we haven't tried to verify that, although interesting, they're building a big new building, giant residential building in Arlington, Virginia, where my brother is a commissioner. So he'll be looking into that to see if they're at all living up to their real estate promises. But that's just a tiny bit of their overall investments. So their farmland is held somewhere else. Their general fund is their direct investments. And they have never even committed to saying no new fossil fuel investments in their direct investments. So they haven't made any sort of commitment at all.
Iris, can I jump in?
Yes, please, please.
Yeah, there's been a couple questions about, is it a good idea to try to, lobby to get academic institutions to provide truly green alternatives? Would that be something that would be worthwhile? A couple people have asked that. James asked, and Wendy just asked as well. How should folks try to get their institutions to provide different options?
So I'll take a quick answer for that, and then I'm sure Brian and probably Caroline will want to answer as well, maybe others. It's really important to keep the public pressure on TIAA. So we believe that the most important political priority is to pass resolutions and do demonstrations, hang a banner, just make noise, use social media, press to really pressure TIAA to divest. So just shifting some money into cleaner, greener funds by itself won't necessarily accomplish that. So just want to be really clear about that. We haven't seen that other options like Fidelity, for example, are necessarily any cleaner or greener. So that's why instead of doing a campaign to tell everybody, hey, switch from TIAA to Fidelity, that's not what we're doing. Because there's also a pressure campaign for Fidelity to clean up its act. If someone finds a pension fund that really is clean and green, we've been doing this campaign for 2 years. We haven't heard of one yet, but please tell us. And Brian, I think, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, getting obviously economic leverage is a good tool. It's a for-profit, or actually it's not, but financial gain is part of what they are, and the threat to withdraw from that is a real threat for an organization like that. But carrying it out effectively is a really tough lift. I mean, for many of us, our pension funds, we don't have multiple options. It's not easy to move them. We would have to get at SUNY to get the entire university system to shift to an entirely different investment organization. So our focus has been on getting TIAA to change their ways. TIAA has obviously responded to the pressure. I think Bill was speaking earlier about how they've come up with now, sustainability funds that they're offering us. This is important for us to recognize as just outright greenwashing. They can segment off a little area of, a fund for faculty to invest in and feel good about that. But in the meantime, the rest of their entire portfolio can still be invested in fossil fuels. Theoretically, even with these sustainability funds, they could increase their investment in fossil fuels because the rest of their funds are unrestricted. So it's really just a greenwashing shell game, and we shouldn't fall for that idea that they're offering us green alternatives within the organization. The goal is to get the organization itself to divest their funding from TIAA, from fossil fuels. And so we really want to keep the pressure focused on them. And we can do that, through resolutions, but also, as Iris was talking about, through public pressure. They have an image that they want to maintain. They present themselves as socially responsible and environmentally responsible. They're not. Our mission is to expose that, have them feel that pressure, and recognize that they've got to follow all of these other investment, pension funds and endowments, and just get out of fossil fuels.
So I'll just jump in, and there is a I think there's an important question that is more or less implied by Wendy is what's next after your university or academic institution passes a resolution? What do you do with that? And yeah, what comes next after that?
That's a great question. And we haven't had enough. So a lot of the resolutions that have been passed so far have been within the SUNY system. So in that case, we've been pressing on the chancellor to pressure TIAA because all these resolutions have been passed. But in other states, now that this is becoming a national campaign, it's going to vary from university system to university system. But we want the college president or the university chancellor, whoever is the top person, to be directly pressuring TIAA, writing a public letter to them, for example. Also, once resolutions have been passed, if you let us know that it's about to happen, we can help to generate headlines. Most faculty aren't used to, wanting to be in the press about passing a faculty senate resolution. But that can generate headlines, and that in and of itself is very significant because that's exactly what TIAA does not want. What are some other folks' ideas?
I would just add, that, that publicity is obviously one of the main things that's going to bring pressure bear on TIAA and faculty, academics. One of the things we are able to do reasonably well is to write. And it's fairly easy to get an op-ed, to get an editorial, certainly letters to the editor, into your local paper, and raising the issue publicly about why the university that you are with and why their pension funds are invested in this way. We have done it through TIAA Divest, gotten a couple of editorials into print. Obviously, as Iris was talking about, if you do get a resolution passed, that's grounds for a press release, to potentially an article if you follow up with reporters. So we are, I know many faculty aren't ready to get out there and sort of, march in the streets. Hopefully some are. I wish more were. But that traditional protest kind of tactics are good. But we should draw upon the skills and influence that we have. Those three little letters after your name hold sway with a lot of people. So utilize that to make a public statement.
I also want to fold into this. Someone had a very specific question whether it would be a tactic to cause the zero carbon, the fossil fuel free fund within TIAA to be the default option. I don't know how hard that would be. I would suggest, that sounds like a great idea. First of all, would love it if that happened, because if every university that's involved even in this webinar tonight were able to make the fossil free fund their default option, that would have an impact on TIAA. But I wouldn't press for that at the expense of first really pushing hard on TIAA to divest, period, for all the reasons that Brian just said. We don't want people to get their money in a green fund and then relax. We want to keep the pressure on TIAA. There is one and only one fossil-free fund that TIAA has put out, and that did not exist before. So when we first started this campaign, that was not an option. Even the low carbon fund had like 20 horrible fossil fuel companies in it. Trying to look, and there were some specific institutions mentioned tonight, like Pratt Institute, Virginia Commonwealth University Health System. And I just want to reinforce that people can become a contact for your institution, for your state, for your region. And also faculty and staff tend to have contacts, an incredible network across the country as well. So if you're at Michigan and you know someone in California, you may be able to galvanize them and be even more effective. We might not have addressed every single question, but are there any burning questions that might have been asked in the chat or the Q&A that anybody wants to type in?
I think while we're just waiting for the last questions to come in, I'm thinking about this question of what happens after the resolution. I think maybe part of what our strategy has been, and of course we're really open to thinking about other ideas, but is to move from the campus level to this more national level. So that is, each campus can pass a resolution, but then the other kinds of pressures that we would be putting on TIAA would be going to other institutions, gathering people from a broader and broader range of places. And so I'm not sure that staying within the institution after the resolution is what will happen for everybody, or what is the next best step. Although, as we were pointing out, putting pressure on the institution to put more pressure on TIAA is great. But we're open to thoughts about strategy.
We also, it hasn't been mentioned too much, but we have an active social media team. And so far we have TIAA Divest on Facebook. We have a lot of messaging on Twitter. And we don't have Instagram yet, but that's also something that faculty are welcome to do, but that we really welcome students to join us in, but pounding TIAA on social media. They should be getting a daily pounding, and I'm often out there kind of pounding them once a day myself, and it really should be much more thunderous. So anyone who has social media skills is welcome. And Caroline has a special knack for turning people's essays and letters into op-eds. So all the writers out there can get a really quick tune-up with Caroline and possible op-ed publishing.
Eric is asking, what is the best, what's the Twitter handle? Where should people follow if they want to get engaged on Twitter?
Yeah. So we actually haven't set up yet a TIAA Divest dedicated Twitter handle. That's our own campaign. So we are using my handle from my organization, Protecting Our Waters. It's a little bit strange, and I'll type it in as well. It's at POW, which is Protecting Our Waters, no fracking. The other way to find the existing messaging on Twitter around TIAA Divest is by using the hashtag TIAA Divest and the hashtag no land grabs. And I'll type those in as well.
Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. Any final words or thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
We really are so grateful that you were able to join us. And we, in this particular format, we don't have as much kind of discussion, give and take. I think at our next meeting, which will be in January of 2022, we will have more of a discussion format, but we'd really love and welcome you to contact us either through the TIAA Divest email or individually if you have questions, if you want to get started on a campaign. Otherwise, look out for our newsletter and look out for the campaign survey, which you're going to get tomorrow, and we will be in touch with you to help figure out how best to both serve your purposes and to use your talents.